Tycoon left his pregnant wife on their anniversary night. 3 years later, saw her with triplets at an event. It was the kind of evening Seoul only offered a few times a year. Soft rain misted the city streets, streetlights glowing like distant stars, and a quiet hush settled over the skyline. In the penthouse on the 41st floor, golden lights shimmered through the glass windows, casting warm shadows on the polished marble floors. Soo-jin stood barefoot in front of the mirror, adjusting the delicate silver necklace she had chosen just for tonight. Her hands trembled, not from nervousness, but from anticipation. Her cheeks flushed with excitement, and she gently touched her belly, still flat, but carrying a truth she could no longer hold alone. "I'm ready," she whispered to her reflection, eyes brimming with hope. Tonight will change everything. It was their 5th wedding anniversary. 5 years since Miho had taken her hand beneath a canopy of cherry blossoms and promised her forever. Soo-jin still remembered the way his eyes used to light up when he looked at her, as if she was the only woman in the world. She glanced at the dining table she had spent the whole afternoon decorating. Soft candles flickered between dishes filled with his favorite foods: galbi, kimchi stew, and the sesame rice balls she always made when he was stressed. A small gift box sat in the center, wrapped carefully in gold ribbon. Inside it, the sonogram picture, the first image of the tiny life growing inside her. But Miho wasn't home yet. She checked the clock again. 7:48 p.m. He was supposed to arrive at 7 o'clock sharp. Soo-jin sat on the edge of the sofa, smoothing out her satin dress. Every passing minute stretched her chest tighter, each tick of the second hand cutting into her hope. Just then, the elevator dinged. Her heart soared. She stood up quickly, patting her belly. "Appa's home," she whispered with a smile. Miho walked in wearing a dark navy suit, his tie slightly loosened, his expression unreadable. He looked distracted, or maybe tired. She couldn't tell. "You're late," she said softly, trying to keep the hurt from her voice. "I know," he muttered, setting down his phone without meeting her eyes. "Work ran late." She stepped forward, placing a hand gently on his arm. "It's our anniversary, Miho." "I didn't forget," he said sharply. "I just had more important things to handle." Her hand dropped to her side. That tone, it wasn't new. It had been creeping into his voice more and more over the past months. Detached, cold, like a stranger had moved into the body of the man she married. But she refused to let tonight be ruined. "Not tonight. I made dinner," she said, forcing a smile. "Your favorite. Come sit with me." Miho sighed and walked toward the table, glancing at the candles, the carefully prepared meal, and the small box. He didn't say anything, just pulled out the chair and sat down stiffly. Soo-jin tried to lighten the mood. She poured him wine, filled his plate, and even laughed awkwardly as she recalled their honeymoon trip to Jeju Island. He barely nodded, barely spoke. And then, just as dessert was served, a simple bowl of fresh strawberries and cream, she reached for the little box. "There's something I want to give you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. He looked up for the first time that evening. "I was going to wait, but..." She opened the box slowly, turning it toward him. "Miho, we're going to be parents." The air froze between them. He stared at the sonogram, unmoving. "I'm pregnant," she said, trying to read his face. 10 weeks. I found out last month. I wanted to be sure before telling you. That's why I've been feeling tired and..." "Is this a joke?" he said flatly. The smile on her face faltered. "What? You're telling me this now? On our anniversary?" His voice was rising, sharp and clipped. "I thought it would be special," she replied, her throat tightening. Miho stood up abruptly. "Soo-jin, I don't have time for this. You know how many deals I'm handling right now. You know how much pressure I'm under. And now you throw this on me like it's a gift." She stood as well, her voice shaking. "It is a gift, Miho. It's our child." He looked away, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't sign up for this right now. Not like this." Tears welled in her eyes. "Miho, what are you saying?" He turned toward her, expression hard. "I don't want to be a father. Not now. Maybe not ever." A silence fell between them, so heavy, it seemed to suck the air out of the room. Sujin's body went cold. But we're married. We said we'd build a family. You said, that was 5 years ago, he snapped. Things change. People change. I've changed. Her voice broke. Into what? Miho's jaw clenched. Into someone who's finally realizing what he wants. And it's not this. The world around her shattered. All the little pieces of hope, of memories, of promises, they collapsed in an instant. She whispered, there's someone else, isn't there? He didn't answer. His silence screamed louder than any confession. Sujin took a trembling step back. How long? Miho finally looked her in the eye. Long enough to know she understands me. She doesn't trap me in a world I don't want. Her knees nearly buckled. I'm not a prison, Miho. I'm your wife. Not anymore, he said. And just like that, he turned away. He walked toward the door without a glance back, grabbed his phone, and stepped into the elevator. The doors closed, and Sujin fell to the floor, her hands clutching her stomach, as sobs ripped from her chest. Not just for herself, but for the life inside her. For the child who would never hear its father's voice that night. For the dreams that died in silence. The candles kept flickering. The food went cold. And outside, the rain began to fall harder. Sujin sat alone in the darkness of the penthouse, her heart broken not just by betrayal, but by the cruel timing of it all. On the night they were supposed to celebrate, she stared at the ceiling until dawn broke, her hands still on her belly, as if trying to protect what was left. The world outside continued, unaware of the war inside her chest. She sat at the breakfast table, her eyes swollen and red, her fingers wrapped tightly around a cup of cold tea. She hadn't touched her phone, kept lighting up with messages, none from Miho. Instead, there were press notifications. Rumors of Miho's new relationship with his business partner, Hannah Young, had gone public. There were photos, headlines, smiles that weren't meant for her, kisses that didn't belong to her anymore. And worse, she hadn't even told anyone they were over. She hadn't told anyone she was pregnant. Alone in the echo of their once shared home, she whispered softly to her belly, "You're not alone. I'm here. I'll be here, even if he won't." A knock on the door startled her. She opened it to see Miho's assistant, standing stiffly, holding out a thick white envelope and a suitcase. "I was told to bring this," he said without meeting her eyes. "The apartment will be transferred to another name next week. You'll have to move out before then." Her heart dropped. "He's taking the house too?" The assistant hesitated. "It's company property now. I'm sorry, Mrs. Lee. I mean, Mississippi." He left the suitcase and turned away. No goodbye, no sympathy. She sank to the floor again. Everything was being stripped from her. Her husband, her home, her name. She had nothing but the growing life inside her. And for the first time, fear outweighed heartbreak. That night, she opened the envelope. It was cold and impersonal. Divorce papers already signed on his side. There was no letter, no message, only a note from a lawyer offering a quiet settlement and a non-disclosure clause. He wanted to erase her, erase everything. Her tears came back in waves. But as she cried, something changed. Her hands, still resting on her stomach, felt a small flutter, a movement, tiny but unmistakable. Her breath caught in her throat. It was the first time she felt it. The baby. No babies? Was it just one? The flutter came again, stronger. She closed her eyes and whispered, "You're still here. You're still fighting." And something inside her shifted. She stood up, still trembling, still shattered, but with a flicker of determination. "I won't let him erase us." Over the next few days, she quietly sold her personal belongings. Jewelry he had given her, designer clothes she no longer had use for. She kept nothing that reminded her of Miho. She called no friends. She knew most of them were his allies from his world. Cold, sharp, polished. The kind of people who'd smile in front of her and whisper behind her back. Instead, she booked a one-way train ticket south. Far from the city. Far from the press, the cameras, the gossip. to a place where no one knew the name Sujin Lee. She arrived in a small coastal village, the air smelling of salt and wildflowers, the streets lined with stone houses and stray cats. She carried only a single suitcase and her pregnancy. An old woman stood at the station, holding a hand-painted sign, "Room for rent." Sujin approached her. "I saw your listing," she said quietly. The woman looked her up and down. "You look like someone who's running." "I am." "Running from a man?" Sujin didn't reply. The woman chuckled. "That's all right. We've all done it at some point. Come, child. You need rest." Her name was Ajuma Hai, and she gave Sujin a small room in the back of her modest home, overlooking the sea. The window opened to wind and waves instead of skyscrapers. The silence felt kind, not cruel. For the first time in weeks, Sujin slept through the night. She began working in the village library in exchange for meals and lodging. It wasn't glamorous, but it was peaceful. The children loved her gentle voice and her habit of reading aloud under the shade tree. Her belly began to grow, and the villagers grew curious but didn't pry. They simply accepted her. One day, while cleaning the bookshelves, she found an old notebook. Its pages were empty, slightly yellowed. She opened it slowly and began to write. It started as a letter. "Miho, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't even know why I'm writing it. Maybe because I still remember the man you used to be. Or maybe because I need to believe that my pain deserves a voice. I wanted to tell you in a better way. I wanted you to be excited. I wanted you to hold me. But you left before I could even say everything. You left before I could feel safe." She kept writing. Every night. Not to him, really, but to herself. Each letter helped her let go, piece by piece. The notebook became her companion, her confessional, her silent witness. And as her belly grew larger, so did her strength. But just when she started to feel calm again, the pain came. It was too early. She collapsed in the library aisle, clutching her stomach, gasping. Ajuma Hai found her, screaming for help. The village doctor arrived quickly, but his face paled as he examined her. "She's carrying more than one," he said urgently. "I hear 3 heartbeats." "3," Ajuma whispered. "Yes, triplets, but they're in distress." The ride to the hospital was long and bumpy. Sujin faded in and out of consciousness. She heard voices, machines, prayers. She thought she heard Miho's voice once, but it was only her mind playing tricks. Then darkness, then light, then crying. So many cries. High, soft, insistent. She blinked open her eyes. A nurse smiled down at her. "You're awake. You did it. You saved them." "Saved who?" "Your sons. 3 beautiful boys. Identical." Sujin wept. She wept harder than she ever had before. Not from pain, not from grief, but from love. The kind of love that was unbreakable, unconditional. She was no longer just Sujin. She was their mother, their protector, their everything. And in that moment, she made a vow not to chase the past, not to wait for an apology, not to beg for anything from Miho, but to raise these boys with strength, with kindness. And with every ounce of love, she turned her head slowly to the bassinets lined beside her. 3 tiny faces. 3 identical little noses. Their breaths rose and fell in unison, like the tides. She reached out, fingers trembling, and gently touched the hand of the one closest to her. He curled his fingers around hers instinctively. "Minjun," she whispered, the name escaping her lips like a secret. She glanced at the second baby. "Minjae," and the third, the smallest of them all. "Mingyu." Her voice cracked as she said each name, tears blurring her vision. "You 3. You saved me." A nurse walked in quietly, checking the monitors. "They're strong," she said softly. "They came early, but they're fighters. Just like their mother," added the older doctor who stepped in behind her. "You were lucky, Miss Kim." Sujin blinked. "It's Lee. Or, it was." The doctor gave her a kind smile. "Well, you're someone else now, aren't you?" She didn't reply. She didn't need to, because he was right. Days turned into weeks, and her body began to heal slowly. The boys gained weight. Their cheeks grew rounder. They began to open their eyes, dark, almond-shaped, curious eyes that always found hers first. The nurses adored them. The villagers sent blankets and baskets of herbs. Ajumahai visited every day with soup and lullabies from her own childhood. But in the quiet moments of the night, when the boys finally slept and the hallways emptied, Sujin still felt the hollow ache of absence. Not for Miho himself, no. That love had bled out of her in that cold penthouse. But for the promise, the dream that had died. She would catch herself wondering, would he have held them like this? Would he have kissed their foreheads? She hated herself for wondering. One night, a nurse brought her a small envelope that had arrived from the city. No sender listed. She opened it with cautious fingers, expecting a bill or some bureaucratic notice. Instead, she found a photograph. It was from a magazine article. A glossy page, Miho and Hannah, arms locked, flawless smiles, posing in front of a new luxury hotel bearing his company name. The caption read, "Power Couple of the Year, Miho Lee and Hannah Jung redefine Seoul's luxury market." Sujin's stomach turned. The same man who had fled at the sound of the word father was now parading through galas and interviews like the world had never once trembled beneath his cruelty. She tore the page in half and threw it into the trash. But that night, the old anger returned. Not wild and hot like before, but colder, more focused. It curled itself around her spine and whispered, "He doesn't deserve to forget." Sujin stayed in the village another year. She grew stronger. She found joy in the small things, watching her sons take their first unsteady steps along the garden path, hearing their laughter echo through the library, teaching them to say her name with giggles and sticky fingers. "Mama," they would sing in chorus. Each one of them had Miho's eyes. It was impossible not to see it. Every time she looked into those deep, searching stares, it was like staring at a reflection of the man who left her and the life that refused to be erased. She began writing again. Not letters, but stories. Simple ones at first. Fairy tales, parables, bedtime adventures filled with heroes who never abandoned their children. But as her confidence returned, her stories deepened. They held pain, and truth, and resilience. A woman from the nearby town who worked with a small publishing house discovered her work through the library and asked if she would submit one of the pieces for a national contest. "I don't have the time," Sujin had said at first. "Make it," the woman replied. "The world needs to hear your voice." She submitted the story under a pen name. It won. Suddenly, there were inquiries, interviews, a buzz of interest. Sujin declined most of them. She had no desire to become a public figure, but one invitation stood out. A charity event in the city, a fundraiser for children's literacy. They wanted her to attend as a guest author. No cameras, just a reading and a small panel. Private, quiet, harmless. She stared at the invitation for days before accepting it. "I'm not going to see him," she whispered to herself, folding the letter. This isn't about him. But her heart thudded differently that night. The memory of Seoul's skyline haunted her dreams. As the day approached, she prepared. Not just her notes and speech, but herself. She wore a soft, elegant dress. Nothing extravagant, but something that made her feel whole again. She tied her long hair back with a ribbon, the same shade as her son's eyes. The triplets were left in the care of Ajumahai, now like a grandmother to them. "Mama's going to read stories to other children today," she told them, kissing their heads. "But I'll be back soon. Always." The city hadn't changed. The noise, the pace, the cold steel buildings. It all rushed back into her lungs the moment she stepped off the train. But she walked tall now, with purpose, with a story no one could steal. The event hall was beautiful. Crystal chandeliers, velvet curtains, polished floors that reflected the chandeliers like stars beneath her feet. She stepped inside, clutching her speech. She didn't notice the posters, didn't notice the new list of sponsors added last minute. She didn't know. Not yet. The hall began to fill slowly. Parents, children, educators. A quiet, cultured audience. She was seated near the back, waiting for her turn to speak. And then the room shifted. Energy, whispers, heads turned. Sujin turned too, and her breath left her body. Miho had just entered the room. He looked older, more chiseled, still handsome in that cold, effortless way. Dressed in a charcoal suit, flanked by assistants, nodding at cameras. He was there. Why this event? A host stepped up to the microphone. We'd like to thank our newest surprise sponsor, who just joined us today, Mr. Miho Lee, CEO of LJK Holdings. Sujin's hands tightened around the folder in her lap. She couldn't move, couldn't blink. Miho's eyes scanned the crowd casually, then stopped, froze, their gazes locked. For the first time in 3 years, she didn't look away, neither did he. Something cracked in the air between them, like glass under pressure, unseen but deafening. 1,000 unspoken words hovered, and in that suspended moment, Sujin wondered, would he recognize them? Would he see the truth in their faces? She hadn't brought the boys. She hadn't meant for this to happen. But fate didn't ask for permission. It just brought you back to the moment you thought you'd never survive, so it could show you how much you'd grown beyond it. Sujin. She was different. There was no fragility now. No pleading gaze, no wilted shoulders. She sat upright, elegant, as if the silence between them had built armor on her skin. Her hands didn't tremble. Her eyes, however, held storms. He took a step forward, then stopped as if an invisible wall held him back. Sujin slowly looked away, not with fear, but with intention. She refused to acknowledge him any further. The moment passed. The host called her name. Ladies and gentlemen, we're honored to introduce our next guest, an award-winning writer whose debut collection of children's stories has touched hearts across the country. Please welcome Miss Kim Hain. She stood. The name wasn't hers, but it was the one she had chosen when she rebuilt herself from ashes. She walked to the podium, her footsteps light but steady. The spotlight found her, and so did every eye in the room. She didn't shake. Her voice was calm, low but strong. "Thank you," she began, "for allowing me to share something personal tonight. Not just a story, but a piece of my journey." Miho listened from his place near the side wall, his body rigid. She opened her folder and began to read. Once upon a time, there was a woman who believed love could fix everything. She gave her whole heart to a man who saw the world in numbers and towers, not in lullabies or late-night fears. One day, that man left. On the night she thought he would hold her close, he handed her silence instead. And she was left, carrying more than sorrow. A ripple ran through the audience. Some parents glanced at one another. Others leaned forward. Miho's jaw tightened. Sujin continued, voice unwavering. She ran, far, not out of shame, but out of survival. And as she ran, 3 tiny flames began to grow inside her. Life that had not been chosen by both, but protected fiercely by one. Her voice grew softer now. This story is not about revenge or anger. It is about becoming. About rebuilding a soul with lullabies and scraped knees and the quiet laughter of 3 hearts that called her mama long before they spoke. She closed the folder. Silence. Thick, heavy, and then applause. Not loud, not thunderous, but warm, honest, respectful. Miho didn't clap. He couldn't. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides. He had been pierced, not by a weapon, but by truth delivered with grace, without his name ever being spoken. She stepped down. Their eyes met again. This time he made his move. She was walking toward the hallway near the exit when his voice stopped her. Sujin. She turned slowly. Her name in his voice sounded unfamiliar now. It didn't move her. It didn't belong to her anymore. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said. "I could say the same." Her tone was calm, but it sliced like glass. He stepped closer. "That story, it was about me, wasn't it?" She looked at him evenly. "Was it?" "I didn't know," he said. "I didn't know you were pregnant." Her smile was faint, bitter. "You knew. You just didn't care." His face twisted. That's not fair. No, she said. It's not fair. None of it was. Not being left on a night that was supposed to be filled with celebration. Not being pushed out of my home like I was a mistake. Not delivering 3 sons alone while you smiled on red carpets. His voice dropped. Sons? Something flickered in his eyes. Shock, regret. But she wasn't moved. Yes, 3. They look just like you. Same eyes. Same laugh. She paused. But thankfully, their hearts are nothing like yours. He swallowed hard. Where are they? Safe, she replied. Can I meet them? She studied him for a long moment. The arrogance was gone. So was the coldness. But there was still something missing. Something she had waited for once. Desperately but no longer needed. Why now, mijo? Because I made a mistake, he said, voice low. I was scared. I was selfish. But I never stopped thinking about you. You never once reached out. I thought you hated me. I did. The words hung in the air between them. But I don't anymore, she said at last. Because hate still gives you a place in my heart. And you don't have that anymore. He took a deep breath, struggling. Let me try, Sujin. Let me fix what I broke. You can't fix what you destroyed. I can be there. For them. For the boys. Her eyes narrowed. You want to claim them now? When it's convenient. After years of silence. He didn't answer. She turned, ready to walk away. But his voice came again, desperate this time. Sujin. What are their names? She froze. And without turning back, she whispered into the quiet hallway. Minjun, Minjae, Mingyu. Then she left. Miho hadn't followed her. She didn't know if that made her feel relieved or disappointed. She didn't want to feel anything at all. But her heart still reacted, still twisted in that quiet, aching way it did when an old wound was pressed too hard. She boarded the train in silence, the city flashing by her window like a forgotten life. When she arrived at the village, the air smelled like earth and pine, the sky tinged with soft gray. It was already dark, but the window to her room was glowing warmly, and from inside, laughter spilled out. She stepped through the door, soaked and silent. Iyama! 3 voices squealed in unison. Her boys ran to her, still in their pajamas, hair tousled from evening play. Mingyu clutched her leg. Minjun held up a wooden toy he'd built. Minjae tugged at her hand with something sticky on his cheek. You're wet, Minjun said. Are you crying? Minjae asked, tilting his head. Sujin knelt slowly, arms opening as all 3 rushed into them. She held them tightly, burying her face in their hair. No, she whispered, voice cracking. I'm not crying. Ajumahai appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. You stayed longer than expected. I saw him, Sujin said. The old woman didn't ask who. She simply nodded. And he looked straight at me, as if he never expected I'd survive. But you did. I did. You thrived. Sujin exhaled, resting her cheek against her son's heads. He asked to meet them. Will you let him? I don't know. There was a pause. You will, I said. Not for him, for them, but on your terms. Later that night, after the boys had fallen asleep in a pile of blankets and dreams, Sujin stood at the window of her room. The rain had stopped. She held a cup of warm barley tea in her hands. Her fingers curled around it, but her thoughts were far. A quiet knock came at the door. She turned. It's late, Hai. I'm all right. But it wasn't Hai. A voice came through the wooden door. I know. I had to see them. Miho. Her breath hitched. For a moment, she thought she was imagining it, that her memories were taunting her. She didn't move. I went to the train station, he said through the door. The staff told me you came here often. I didn't expect to find this place so easily. But when I saw the lights, I knew it was you. Silence. Then, I won't push. I'll leave if you want me to. Just, please, Sujin. Let me see them. Once. She opened the door slowly, just a crack. And there he stood. No suit. No arrogance. Just Miho. Hair damp from the rain, eyes tired, holding a single umbrella in one hand and a plastic bag in the other. "I brought snacks," he said awkwardly. "Gummy bears. I remember you said they'd be your pregnancy craving if you ever got pregnant." Her eyes flickered. "That was years ago." "I remember it anyway." A long, heavy pause stretched between them. Then, gently, she opened the door wider. "They're asleep. I won't wake them." He stepped inside quietly, glancing around at the cozy space filled with wooden toys, children's books stacked in corners, and crayon drawings taped to the walls. He stood in front of one drawing that showed for stick figures. One tall with long hair, 3 small ones labeled in scribbled letters, and one missing. His throat tightened. "They don't know me." "No," Sujin said. "They don't." "Do they ask?" "They asked once when they were younger. I told them some daddies live far away, and some daddies don't know how to love yet." Miho looked at her. The words cut deeper than shouting ever could. She watched his face carefully. He wasn't wearing his usual mask. No public persona. No media smile. Just a man standing inside the life he had chosen to abandon. He walked slowly toward the bedroom door. It was open just a crack. Just enough for him to glimpse them. Curled up like kittens, breathing in sync, sharing one big pillow. His eyes filled with tears. "I missed it," he whispered. "All of it. You weren't there." "I know." He pressed a hand to the frame, as if afraid to take one step more. "I used to imagine what they'd look like," he said. "I didn't even know they existed. But I dreamed of children sometimes. At night, in my guilt, they always had your eyes." "They have yours," Sujin said quietly. "It haunts me." Miho turned toward her. "Can I be part of this now?" Her breath caught. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But they deserve the truth. They deserve to know their father." "And what do you deserve?" He looked at her then. Truly looked at her. "Nothing. But I'll earn whatever you allow me to have." A wind picked up outside. The windows rattled softly. Inside, the silence was heavier than any storm. Sujin walked over to the table and placed the plastic bag he'd brought down. She looked at the gummy bears, then at him. "I won't lie to them," she said. "If you stay, they'll know everything one day. They should. I can't promise they'll want you. I'll wait. I can't promise I'll want you. I'm not here for that," he said, his voice low and raw. "I'm here because the man who left you that night died a long time ago. I just didn't know it until I saw your eyes again." Sujin said nothing, but she didn't ask him to leave. And in that fragile, quiet truce, something shifted. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But the smallest crack in the wall she'd built. Enough for the wind to pass through. Sujin stood at the sink, hands resting on the edge of the counter, unmoving. Her reflection in the glass was blurred by the light. Just a silhouette of a woman still trying to decide if she'd made a mistake letting him in. Behind her, soft footsteps echoed. Miho. He was quiet, unsure if he should even speak. His presence in her world still felt like a violation, even though he'd come asking for nothing. His eyes moved over the kitchen table where the boys' cereal bowls waited in a neat row, each with a spoon already inside. 3 little backpacks leaned against the wall. Shoes mismatched, jackets too small. But it was perfect. This was home. A home he'd never touched. "I didn't sleep," he said softly, his voice rough from the floor where he'd rested. "I just watched them breathing. It didn't feel real." Sujin turned her head slightly. "It is real. It's always been." He walked forward, slow, tentative. "Do they have a routine? Should I leave before they wake up?" "I don't know what's right yet." He nodded, swallowing his breath. "Can I stay until breakfast?" She hesitated, then gave a small nod. A moment later, tiny feet padded into the room. Mingyu appeared first, hair sticking up in wild directions, eyes puffy from sleep. He paused in the doorway, staring at the tall man sitting near the window. "Who's that?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. Sujin walked over and crouched beside him, brushing his bangs aside. That's A friend, sweetie. Minjun and Minjae followed, more curious than shy. They all stared, their expressions unreadable. Miho crouched slowly, meeting them at eye level. His hands trembled, but he hid them behind his back. "Hi," he said gently. "I'm Miho." Minjae frowned. "That's like our names." Minjun tilted his head. "Why?" Miho smiled, though it barely held together. "Because I loved those names long before I met you." Mingyu pointed. "Are you the snack man?" Sujin blinked, confused. Miho let out a soft laugh. "Yes, I brought gummy bears." The boys exchanged looks, as if they were processing whether this qualified him as trustworthy. Then, without warning, Mingyu walked over and touched Miho's hand. "Okay," he declared. "You can stay, but only if you sit next to me." Miho's breath hitched. "I'd like that," he whispered. The morning passed in quiet wonder. Miho sat beside them, pouring cereal too clumsily, asking questions like a guest in a new country. He laughed when they told him they hated broccoli. He gasped when Minjun said he could almost read. He listened when Minjae said he wanted to be a builder and build a huge treehouse where Mama can write. It was all so painfully normal, so beautiful, so heartbreaking. After breakfast, Sujin walked with him outside. The boys stayed inside with Hai, arguing about who would get the red gummy bear first. Miho stared out at the sea, the wind brushing through his hair. His hands were shoved deep in his coat pockets, clenched. "I don't know what to do now," he said. "You do what every parent does," she replied. "You show up, again and again, even when you're tired, even when you're scared, even when they don't know if they want you there." He nodded. "I will." She looked at him then, really looked at him. The man in front of her was not the same person who had left her in that glittering penthouse 3 years ago, but he was still carrying that man inside him, like a shadow he couldn't quite outrun. "You think it's simple?" she asked. "You think just showing up changes the nights I cried on a hospital bed, terrified they wouldn't make it? That I wouldn't? That I'd die and they'd be alone?" His shoulders stiffened. "No," he said, voice breaking. "Nothing will ever fix that." "Good," she said, "because this isn't about fixing me or your guilt. It's about them." "I know. Do you?" she asked, stepping closer. "Because I carried them in my body, carried their pain, their coughs, their sleepless nights. I held them through fevers and nightmares and first steps and everything in between. And you," her voice cracked, "you vanished." Miho looked away. "I hated myself. That didn't help them." "I know," he said again. "But if I can start now, if there's even the smallest chance they can grow up knowing me, I'll take it. Even if they never call me Dad. Even if I'm just the snack man." Sujin stared at him, searching his face. Every line, every crease. She could still see the man she had once loved, and hated, and feared. But what she couldn't see, what she wouldn't see yet, was whether she could trust him. Still, something inside her softened. Just a little. "You can come," she said. "You can visit. You can show them who you are. But they will decide. Not me. Not you." "I'll take that," he whispered. "Thank you." He started to walk away, then stopped. "I've been going to therapy," he said without turning back. "For a year now." Her eyes widened. "I didn't think it mattered, but now it does. You deserve to know." And with that, he walked off, disappearing into the coastal mist like a figure in a dream. Sujin stood in place, the wind wrapping around her like a question. Nothing was certain, nothing was easy, but something had begun. She should have felt relief. Miho hadn't demanded anything. He hadn't forced himself into their lives. He had respected her rules. But something inside her twisted anyway. She closed her eyes, resting her head against the wooden frame. The boys were asleep, tangled together in a pile of blankets and limbs, dreaming their innocent dreams. They had accepted him so easily, perhaps too easily. And she wasn't ready. She pressed her hand to her chest, as if trying to calm the thunderstorm inside her ribs. A faint creak broke the silence. She turned. Min-jae stood barefoot at the door, rubbing his eye, dragging his blanket behind him. "Why are you still up, Mama?" he asked. She smiled gently. "Couldn't sleep." He walked over and crawled into her lap, small arms wrapping around her waist. "Is the snack man coming back?" Sujin tensed. "Maybe." Min-jae looked up at her. "Is he our dad?" She froze. Min-jae blinked, waiting. She swallowed. "Yes," she whispered. "He is." He nodded once like he had already known. He was sad. Sujin's throat tightened. "You think so?" He smiled, but his eyes were crying. He paused. "Like yours do sometimes." She ran her fingers through his hair, blinking away the sting in her eyes. "I think maybe he wants to learn how to be better," he added. She didn't answer, but her heart cracked open a little more. The next day, Miho returned. He didn't knock on the door. Instead, he waited outside near the garden gate, holding a paper bag filled with coloring books and homemade cookies. Sujin watched him from the kitchen window, her hands still wet from washing dishes. "You'll have to let him in eventually," Hai said, drying a cup behind her. "I let him in. I mean truly." Sujin stayed quiet. "Pain doesn't go away when you ignore it," Hai added. "It just finds new places to grow." Sujin sighed. "And what if letting him back in means I lose everything I built? Then you decide whether it's worth the risk." She stepped outside, the boys already racing past her and shouting his name like it had never been a question. "Snack man!" He knelt, arms open. They tackled him, laughing. He laughed too, louder than she had ever heard. She stood a few steps behind, watching. He met her gaze over their heads. And this time, he didn't look like he was begging. He looked patient, grateful. A man who finally understood the cost of absence. Later that afternoon, she found him sitting on the porch, the boys asleep again after running wild for hours. He looked exhausted, but peaceful. "Do you know," he said without looking at her, "they each have a favorite song already? Min-jae likes the one about the tiger who eats spicy rice cakes. Mingyu hates lullabies. And Minjun says he's not sleepy but always falls asleep first." Sujin nodded slowly. "You've been listening." "I've been trying." She sat beside him. The silence between them was no longer heavy, just honest. "I watched them take their first steps," she whispered. Minjun's knees were always shaky. He was scared to fall. Min-jae walked too fast and hit the wall. Mingyu didn't even look at his feet. He just ran. Miho smiled, eyes misting. "I missed everything." "You did." "I'll never forgive myself." "You shouldn't expect forgiveness." "I don't," he said, "but I'll never stop trying to deserve it." She looked down at her hands. "When you left that night, I thought I would die." He turned to her sharply, pain flashing through him. "I would lie in bed and imagine you coming back. Just once. Just long enough to hold my hand and say, 'I'm sorry, Sujin.' But then, I stopped waiting. I stopped hoping." "I'm sorry," he said softly, voice cracking. "I'm so sorry, Sujin." She looked at him, the words hanging between them like a fragile bridge. "I didn't bring them into this world to make you suffer," she said. "But I won't let you confuse their love with forgiveness. They don't understand what you did yet, but one day they will, and you'll have to answer to them." "I will." She studied his face, the lines of regret etched deep, the vulnerability unhidden. And for the first time, she saw a version of Miho she had never met before, the man he might have been all along, if fear and pride hadn't poisoned him. "Miho," she said slowly, "if you're serious about being in their lives, then it has to be every day, not when it's convenient, not when it's easy." "I'm here," he said, voice firm. "I'll move here. I'll find a place nearby. I'll start from the ground up. You'll need to be okay with them not needing you." "I need them," he said. "Needing me is something they'll decide." The sun dipped lower behind the hills, painting the sky in hues of orange and lavender. The waves whispered below. And for the first time in years, Sujin didn't feel like she was fighting alone. Miho had stayed, not just for a day, but for weeks. He rented a modest cottage just down the path, one with peeling shutters and a crooked chimney, where the ocean could be heard at night and the stars weren't dimmed by city lights. He woke up early, helped the boys pick wildflowers, packed their lunches when Sujin had a headache, and sat beside them during story time. He never pushed. He never asked for more than what he was given. But even in the comfort of this fragile rhythm, the ghosts never truly slept. That morning, Sujin opened her drawer and found the notebook, the one she had written in during her pregnancy. Pages and pages of letters never sent. She ran her fingers across the worn edges, heart thudding softly. She hadn't touched it since the boys were born. One evening, after the boys had gone to sleep and Hai had retired early with a bad cough, Sujin stepped outside. Miho was sitting on the wooden bench beneath the porch light, sketching something in a notebook. She hadn't known he sketched. She stood there for a moment watching him, his brow furrowed, pencil moving slowly, uncertain, as if he wasn't drawing lines, but regrets. "Still trying to draw the treehouse they described?" she asked gently. He looked up, startled, then offered a faint smile. "It looks more like a chicken coop. Min-jae would cry if he saw this." She sat beside him. "I found something today," she said. "Something I thought I'd buried." He looked over, curious. She pulled the worn notebook from under her shawl and placed it on the bench between them. "I wrote letters to you while I was pregnant, when I was alone." His expression changed instantly, like someone had poured cold water over him. "You don't have to read them," she said quickly. "They weren't meant to be read. I think I wrote them to survive." He reached for the notebook slowly, as if it were sacred. "May I?" Sujin hesitated, then nodded once. Miho opened the first page. His eyes scanned the ink, her handwriting uneven in some places, tear-stained in others. He read the first line aloud, voice barely a whisper. "You missed the sound of the heartbeat today." His throat tightened. She looked away, staring at the stars. He turned the page. "I bought a tiny blue hat. I don't even know if it's a boy, but I imagined you laughing when you saw it." Another page. "I had a nightmare last night. I dreamed I was giving birth alone, and no one came. No one." Miho pressed his palm over his mouth. His shoulders trembled. "I'm sorry," he said, barely able to speak. "I didn't know you wrote these. I didn't know how to stay. But that doesn't mean you deserve to face any of it alone." "I didn't want you to fix it," Sujin said softly. "I just wanted you to stay. I ran because I was afraid. Afraid I'd become my father. Afraid I'd ruin you. Afraid I'd be a failure. And by running," she said, "you did all of those things anyway." His silence was answer enough. The air grew colder, the silence pressing against them like fog. Finally, he closed the notebook, placed it gently back on the bench and looked at her. "I want them to know the truth, when they're ready, about me, about what I did. You'll have to answer every question, even the hard ones." "I will. And you'll have to stay even if they push you away." "I'll stay." Sujin studied him in the golden light of the porch. She didn't trust easily, but something inside her whispered that maybe, just maybe, he was changing. And then, the question she'd been avoiding rose to the surface. "What about Hannah?" Miho looked up. "What do you mean? Does she know where you are? Does she know about the boys?" He shook his head slowly. "No. She knows I left the company. She knows I needed space. But she doesn't know the truth. And when she finds out, she'll be angry. Will she try to ruin this?" Miho was quiet. "She won't get close," he said finally. "She never really knew me anyway, but she knew the version of you that left me behind." He winced. "I'm not proud of that version," he said, "but I'm not hiding from him anymore either." Sujin exhaled deeply. "Then tell her." He looked at her, startled. "Tell her the truth. About me. About them. About everything. No more shadows, Miho." He nodded slowly. "All right, I will. Because if you don't," she added, "she'll find out eventually. And it'll be worse. For all of us." He reached over, hesitated. then gently placed his hand over hers. "I'll protect this," he said. "You, them, whatever us becomes." Her eyes softened. "I'm not asking you to protect it," she said, "just to not break it again." Inside, the wind knocked gently against the windows. The boys stirred in their sleep, and the stars above blinked silently, as if witnessing a moment even they weren't sure would last. But for now, they sat side by side. Two people changed by pain, still healing, still unsure, yet brave enough to try. And somewhere far off, a storm began to rise, one that would test every promise made. But peace never stayed long in Sujin's life. She was hanging laundry in the garden when her phone buzzed. A number she didn't recognize. Seoul area code. Her stomach tightened. She hesitated, hands damp with soap, then answered. "Hello." There was a pause. And then, "Did you really think I wouldn't find you?" The voice was silk over ice. Sharp, familiar. Sujin's breath caught. "Hannah," a bitter laugh. "So it's true then. You're alive. With 3 little secrets." Sujin's knuckles whitened around the phone. "How did you get this number? You should be more careful who you trust. The world is very small when you're rich, darling." She turned slightly, instinctively checking the house, the garden gate, as if Hannah could be standing just beyond the trees. "What do you want?" "Answers," Hannah snapped. "I gave him everything. My time, my name, my image, and suddenly he disappears. No press statements, no meetings, no explanation. And now I hear whispers of a woman and children with his eyes." Sujin's voice turned quiet, deadly steady. "What you gave him was conditional, performative, a version of love that only survived in spotlights. But what I gave him, what we gave him, lives and breathes." "You think this is love?" Anna hissed. "Dragging him into the dirt with 3 fatherless brats? Humiliating him?" "I didn't drag him anywhere," Sujin replied coldly. "He came on his own. And don't you dare call them that." Silence. Then Hannah's voice returned, colder. "You always played the victim so well. But let me remind you, he chose me. He chose a life of success, prestige. He built an empire by my side while you faded into nothing. And still," Sujin whispered, "he left it all to return to the nothing you mocked." There was silence on the line. Sujin continued, low and certain. "He's not yours to manipulate anymore. And if you come near my children, I swear, I will become someone you've never met." Click. The call ended. Sujin stood in the garden, heart hammering. The wind had picked up. Laundry flapped violently on the line. Something in the air shifted, like the quiet before a storm. That evening, Miho arrived later than usual. The boys were already asleep. His eyes were dark, jaw clenched. "You spoke to her," he said without preamble. "She called me." He sat down at the table, exhaling hard. "She showed up at my apartment yesterday, slapped me in front of the staff, called me a liar, said I ruined her career." "You did," Sujin said, "but only because you stopped living a lie. She's threatening to leak everything, to go public, to destroy my name, my company, everything I've worked for." Sujin looked at him across the table. "And what do you want me to say, Miho?" "I don't care about the company," he said. "I just care about what she'll do to you, to the boys." She softened, just slightly. "She won't hurt us. You don't know her like I do." "No," she said, "but I know fear, and I'm done letting it make my choices for me." He stared at her. "I'll go back to Seoul," he said. "Handle it, cleanly, quietly. I'll make her sign a non-disclosure agreement if I have to. I just need a few days. And if she refuses, I'll let it burn," he whispered. "Every tower, every deal, every press release with my name on it. If it means protecting this," he pointed to the floor, to the home around them, "then I'll let it all burn." She watched him, the words echoing. "I believed you once," she said. "On a night you made promises and walked away hours later. I won't walk away this time. I don't need a hero," she murmured. "I just need truth." He stood slowly, walked to her, and for a moment, just stood in front of her in silence. Then gently he took her hand. "I'll come back," he said, "not as the man I was, but as the one I should have been all along." And for the first time, Sujin didn't pull her hand away. She watched him walk into the night, into the unknown. And as the door closed behind him, she whispered to no one, "Don't fail them again." Outside, the moon was high. Sujin kept herself busy. She folded laundry, cleaned the kitchen twice in one day, rearranged the books on the shelf that didn't need moving. But the clock ticked louder than usual. The silence was louder. The boys noticed too. "Is the snack man coming today?" Mingyu asked as he stared out the window. "Not today, sweetheart," Sujin said gently. "He had to go back to the city." "Why?" "He has something important to take care of." "More important than us?" Minjun asked, his voice smaller than usual. Sujin knelt beside him and wrapped him in a hug. "Nothing is more important than you. He'll come back," he promised. They didn't ask again. But every evening, when the sun began to fall behind the hills, they would glance toward the road without a word, waiting for footsteps that didn't come. Sujin didn't call Miho. She didn't want to. She didn't want to hear the edge of panic in his voice or the hesitation in his silence. He had made this choice. He had to see it through. But 3 days became 5, then 7. And then, she turned on the TV one night, needing some noise in the room. The boys were asleep. She flipped through channels absent-mindedly. Cooking show, drama reruns, weather report, and then his face. The headline read, "Miho Lee resigns from LJK Holdings. Rumors of secret family confirmed?" The reporter's voice was sharp, slicing through the quiet like a blade. While former partner Hannah Jung refused to comment on the allegations of personal betrayal, a close source confirmed Mr. Lee's sudden departure was linked to the discovery of a hidden relationship and 3 illegitimate children living in a coastal village. Sujin dropped the remote. Her knees buckled, and she caught herself against the armrest. Her photo was on the screen, from the event, holding Minjun's hand. The image was blurred, but it was unmistakably her. And the headline below it screamed louder than anything else. "Former wife or secret mistress? Who is the real Sujin Lee?" Her breath came in short, fast bursts. She grabbed her phone, heart racing. She hadn't received any call, no message, no warning. But the missed calls started now. Numbers she didn't know. Media lines. News agencies. One even called her Miss Kim Hain. Her pen name. They had found everything. And she knew why. Hannah. The knock on the door came before she could even react. Hard. Repetitive. Unapologetic. She grabbed the boy's quilt and threw it over the front window. "Iyama," Minjae called sleepily from the hallway. "Why is it loud?" "Shoo," she whispered, rushing to him. "Stay in your room, baby. Close the door. Okay?" The knocks turned to banging. "Sujin Lee, are you in there?" Flashbulbs, voices, the sound of car engines outside, tires crunching the gravel. She backed away slowly, holding Minjae tightly against her. How had it spiraled this fast? She called one number, the only one that mattered now. "Miho." He didn't answer. She left a voicemail, voice shaking, almost breaking. "It's out. Everything's out. The reporters are here. They found the boys." Click. The next few hours were a blur of locked doors, covered windows, and whispered reassurances to confused children who didn't understand why their home had turned into a prison. Hai stayed by her side, fierce and unyielding. She chased away 2 photographers with a broom and cursed in a way that made even Sujin flinch. By morning, it was everywhere. Social media, news apps, talk shows, people speculating about her, about the boys, about Miho's downfall. And not once, did she see his statement. Nothing. No denial. No defense. No protection. Just silence. Until the 12th day. He arrived without warning. At dawn. His hair disheveled, eyes bloodshot, suit wrinkled like he'd slept in it, or hadn't slept at all. He stepped through the garden gate. The the sound of his feet crunching over broken camera lenses still scattered in the gravel. She opened the door before he knocked. "Where were you?" she asked. No tears, no screaming, just a question layered in exhaustion. "I tried," he said, voice hoarse. "I tried to stop it. I went to every executive, every investor. They wanted me to deny it. They wanted me to call you a mistake. I said no." "Then where were you?" she repeated. "When they plastered my face on national television. When they called our children illegitimate. When I held them and told them not to be afraid of the shadows outside the windows. I was fighting," he said, "and I lost." She stared at him. "I gave everything up," he said. "The board removed me. Hannah made sure of it. But I refused to lie. I refused to erase you again." She looked past him. No reporters, no cameras, just him. "What now?" she whispered. He took a step closer. "Now, I stay, no matter what burns." His hand trembled as he reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a crumpled press release, the one he refused to publish. He handed it to her. She unfolded it slowly, and there it was. "I, Miho Lee, acknowledge my past failures and my absence in the lives of those I should have cherished most. I no longer serve as the CEO of LJK Holdings because I choose to be something greater. A father to my 3 sons, and a man who is no longer afraid to stand beside the woman he once left behind." She looked up at him, eyes filled with something between disbelief and pain. "Why didn't you release it?" "They said it would destroy what little I had left." "And you?" I said. He took a breath. "Then let it be destroyed." Sujin folded the paper, held it tight to her chest, and closed her eyes. Finally, she believed him. Miho sat with them, quieter than usual. He had dark circles under his eyes, but he smiled when Mingyu offered him the last apple slice. He smiled when Minjun asked him to braid his hair like Mama did, even though Miho's fingers were clumsy and slow. But Sujin hadn't smiled yet. Not once. After the boys went to the library with Hai, the house fell into an uneasy stillness. The kind that settled only when something still hung in the air, unfinished. Miho stood in the living room watching the window. "They didn't ask why the men were shouting outside," he said. "No," Sujin replied, folding laundry in the corner. "They trust me when I say everything is all right." He nodded slowly. "Do they trust me?" "That," she said quietly, "depends on what you do next." He turned to face her fully. His hands were clenched. He didn't mean to, but his voice cracked when he spoke. "I need to know how much damage I've done. Not to the world, not to the company, but to you." She didn't look up. "Tell me what you never said," he whispered. "All of it. I want to hear it." She paused, her fingers stilled on a small blue sock. Then she sat, not across from him, not beside him, but in the chair near the window where she often wrote her stories. She stared at her hands, then lifted her eyes to him. "You want the truth?" she said softly. "Then listen carefully, because once I open this door, I'm not closing it." He nodded. "The night you left me," she began, "I wasn't angry, not at first. I was terrified. I kept telling myself you'd come back, that this was some mistake, that maybe you needed space or time or clarity." She took a deep breath. "But then the days passed, and I bled." Miho's head snapped up. "What?" "I almost lost them," she said, voice trembling. 2 weeks after you left, I woke up covered in blood, alone, couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. I crawled to the phone, and the hospital was over an hour away. They told me to lie still, not to panic. But how do you not panic when you think your children are dying inside you? His legs buckled. He sat down hard on the floor. "I didn't know," he began. "Of course you didn't," she cut him off. "Because you weren't there. You chose not to be." Her voice rose now, emotion swelling in her throat. "I begged them to hold on. I whispered to them every night, told them about the ocean, about the stars, about how the world would be kind. But I lied, because the world wasn't kind. You weren't kind. Tears streamed down her face now, but she didn't stop. I sold my wedding ring to buy diapers. I took a job cataloging books for an old woman who couldn't pay me, but fed me rice and made sure I had warm blankets. I didn't get to cry, mijo. I didn't get to fall apart. Mijo lowered his head, trembling, his hands over his mouth. I used to hate you, she whispered, so deeply, it scared me. I'd look at their faces and see yours, and I wanted to scream, but then they started laughing, and they started holding my hand and saying mama, like it was the most sacred word in the world. Her voice broke completely, and little by little, the hate faded. Not because you deserved forgiveness, but because they deserved peace. She stood slowly, walked to him, and knelt down in front of where he sat crumpled on the floor. But if you ever hurt them again, if you ever vanish even for a moment, I won't let you back in. I won't give you another chance. Because now, mijo, I know how to live without you. He was sobbing now, silently, his chest shaking, his hands over his face. I don't deserve this, he rasped. No, she said, you don't, but they do, and they still want you. She stood again, leaving him there with everything he'd finally heard. When Hai returned later with the boys, Sujin was sitting outside with a notebook again. The sky above was deep blue, and the air smelled of salt and sun. Minjae ran to her first. Mama, I drew a monster with 3 heads. She laughed softly. Did you give it a name? Yeah, he beamed. It's called Appa. She blinked, startled. Miho stood at the gate, just behind them, eyes wide. Minjun grinned. He has 3 heads like us, Mingyu added, and lots of arms so he can hug all of us at the same time. They looked up at her. Can he stay for dinner, Mama? She hesitated, then nodded once. He can stay, and the boys cheered, racing back inside. Miho didn't move. Sujin looked at him, eyes calm but unreadable. I told them the truth, she said. That you left, that you're trying now. He nodded. You can earn their love, she said, but don't expect mine to come the same way. I won't, he replied softly. I'll earn yours differently. But it was her silence that began to speak louder. She watched him more now, watched the way he moved, the way he handled the boys' squabbles, the way he lowered himself to their height, eye to eye, never above them. She noticed the way his hands trembled when he thought no one was looking, as if he still didn't know how to hold this life without breaking it again. Still, there were shadows behind his gaze, something he hadn't told her. And one afternoon, when the boys were napping and the house was wrapped in gentle quiet, she couldn't pretend not to feel it anymore. She found him outside near the tree, sketching again. You're hiding something, she said without warning. Miho looked up, startled, pencil freezing midline. What? You've been holding it in since you came back from Seoul. He hesitated, then slowly closed the notebook. I didn't want to burden you. Too late for that, she said, folding her arms. We've passed that threshold long ago. He sat still for a long moment. Then he finally looked at her. Really looked. I saw my mother. Sujin blinked. The words felt like they dropped from the sky. She passed away years ago, Miho. He nodded. Not literally, but I saw her in someone else. I walked past a park, and there was a woman singing the same song she used to hum when I had fevers as a boy. And for a second, I was 8 years old again, curled up under a blanket, waiting for her to finish crying in the next room. Sujin's heart softened. She hadn't expected that. Not from him. Not today. She used to cry at night? She asked. Miho nodded, a bitter smile on his lips. She thought I couldn't hear, but I always did. She was alone. My father was never around, always building his business. And when he was around, he treated her like an accessory. She shrank every year, until there was nothing left of her. He lowered his head, voice barely a whisper. And the day I left you, the night I walked away, I realized later that I had done the same thing. I had become him. Sujin sat beside him slowly, her breath caught in her throat. I hated him, Miho said, but I followed him. I mirrored him, because I didn't know how else to be powerful or strong. I thought love was a weakness, and I thought fear meant failure." He paused. "But then I lost you, and for the first time, I felt everything my mother must have felt." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Sujin whispered, "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I didn't want pity." She turned to him, eyes shining with something deeper than judgment. "It's not pity, Miho. It's understanding." He looked at her. His voice cracked. "I see her face in yours sometimes. When you're tired. When you're pretending to be strong. And it kills me." Sujin looked away, swallowing hard. "I'm not your mother," she said softly. "I know. And you're not your father. I'm trying not to be." They sat there under the branches, the wind rustling the leaves above them like a quiet song. She reached out, gently touched his hand. "You never cried," she said. He frowned. "What? All those years? Even when I told you I was pregnant? Even when you left? I never saw you cry." "I didn't know how," he admitted. "I thought if I cried, I'd never stop. And now," he looked at her, eyes glistening, "I still don't know how to stop." Tears rolled silently down his cheeks. She didn't speak. She just let him weep, let him finally mourn everything he had buried. His mother, his past, his choices, and the life he thought he could control. When the sobs faded, she wiped his face with the edge of her sleeve. "You have to forgive yourself," she said gently. "Not for me, for them." He nodded slowly, still trembling. "I want to tell them everything one day," he whispered. "Not yet, but when they're ready. The truth, the whole truth. Then you will." "And you?" he asked, voice raw. "Will you ever let me back in? Not just for the boys. For you." She didn't answer immediately. She looked out toward the horizon, where the sky met the sea like a forgotten promise. "I don't know," she said. "But for the first time, I'm not afraid to find out." Miho didn't knock before entering the kitchen that morning. He carried a bag of sweet bread from the village bakery, freshly made, still warm. Sujin accepted it with a nod. No words, but she didn't flinch when his fingers brushed hers. The boys were loud as ever, arguing over who had more raisins in their bowl. Miho took a seat at the table and didn't ask if he was allowed to. He just belonged, and somehow that wasn't a violation anymore. After breakfast, the boys ran outside, chasing each other with paper airplanes. Miho helped Sujin wash dishes. Neither said much, but there was no tension, just a quiet rhythm. Hands passing plates, soft clinks of porcelain, warm water between them. And then came the knock on the door. A soft, hesitant knock. Sujin dried her hands slowly, glanced at Miho. He tensed. The knock came again. When she opened the door, she found a woman in a pressed gray coat and dark glasses standing on the steps. Her voice was precise, controlled. "Miss Kim Hain." Sujin's blood went cold. "No one used that name here." "Yes," she replied slowly. The woman removed her glasses. Behind them, her eyes were sharp but not unkind. "My name is Jaiwoo Kong. I'm a journalist." Miho was already behind Sujin in a heartbeat. "No interviews," he said firmly. "I'm not here for a story," Jaiwoo replied. "I'm here because I read yours." Sujin blinked. "The book?" the journalist continued, pulling a thin paperback from her bag. "Letters Underwater. You published under the name Hain, but your voice, it's you. I knew it the moment I read it." Miho stepped forward, protective. "How did you find us?" "I'm not from a tabloid. I'm not here to invade," Jaiwoo said quickly. "I work for a literary column. Your book saved me. I was going through a divorce. I thought I was drowning. But then I read your story. Those letters, the pain, the hope. And I just needed to say, thank you." Sujin said nothing. Jaiwoo looked at Miho, then back at her. "I also know what happened with the media, with LJK Holdings. I followed it. But I'm not here to exploit it. I swear. I just thought maybe, if you ever wanted the truth told your way, through your words, not theirs, I'd help." She handed Sujin her card. "I'll leave you alone. I just needed to say it. Mattered. That you matter. And she walked away. Miho shut the door gently behind her. Sujin stared at the card in her hand, her fingers trembling slightly. You never told me you published it, he said softly. It wasn't for you. I know, he replied, no defensiveness in his tone. But it saved me too. She looked at him. Her eyes were unreadable, but her voice wavered slightly. I wrote it during the nights I couldn't sleep, when they were still newborns, when I was too tired to cry. I remember one of the lines, Miho said, about carrying a storm in silence. I read it after I came back. I didn't know it was yours then, but it felt like you were screaming on the page. I was. And now, he asked carefully, would you let someone else hear it? She turned the card over in her hand. Maybe. A long pause. Then he said, let them see the truth. Don't let someone like Hannah control the story. You survived. You made something beautiful out of pain. The world should see that. She looked down, her voice suddenly quiet. I'm scared. I know. Not of her, she added. Of letting go of the grief. Of not knowing who I am without it. Miho's face changed. Something deep in his eyes broke. I know that too, he said. I don't know who I am without guilt. Without shame. She looked up at him. But maybe, he said, we get to choose who we are now. Together or not. For the boys. For ourselves. For a long moment they said nothing. And then Sujin took the card and placed it gently inside the drawer by the window. Not an answer. But not a refusal either. Later that night, when the boys were asleep, Miho stepped outside for air. He stood by the tree where they had once cried. The moon above was full, painting the leaves silver. He pulled a small envelope from his coat pocket, addressed to Hannah. He had written it days ago. He stared at it a moment, then tore it in half. Then again, then again. He let the pieces fall to the earth. No more letters for the past. Only space now for the present. And inside, at the window, Sujin watched him from behind the curtain. And for the first time, she didn't wonder if he would leave again. She wondered if she was ready to stay. Sujin stirred in bed, blinking against the soft sunlight streaming through the window. A strange calm settled in the air, like the stillness just before a wave crashes. She reached for her robe and stepped out into the living room. The couch was empty. Miho wasn't there. And then she saw it on the kitchen table. A folded piece of paper. A child's drawing. 3 stick figures holding hands with a taller one. The boys had written names underneath in shaky handwriting. Minjun, Minjae, Mingyu, Appa. Her heart squeezed. And then a second note, this one in Miho's handwriting. Took the boys for a walk by the cliffs. Don't worry. They wanted time with me. Just us. I thought maybe they were ready to ask what they've never said. I'll answer everything. Sujin froze. Her fingers curled around the edge of the paper, and her stomach twisted. She grabbed her coat. The cliffs were a short walk, but each step felt like a lifetime. The path wound through the trees and opened up to the sea, where the land dropped into wind and salt. And there they were. Miho sat on a large flat rock, the boys around him. Mingyu had a stick in his hand, drawing something in the dirt. Minjun was leaning on Miho's shoulder, quiet. Minjae was watching the waves below. Sujin didn't call out. She stayed back, hidden behind a tree, heart in her throat. Then Minjae asked the question. Why did you leave, Mama? The words struck harder than any wind. Miho's back stiffened slightly, but he didn't look away from the sea. Because I was afraid, he said gently. I made a mistake, a very big one. But why didn't you come back when we were born? Minjun asked. Did you forget about us? No, Miho whispered. I didn't know. Your mama told me. But I didn't listen. I didn't want to hear it. I was too busy trying to be someone important. But we're important, Mingyu said, frowning. Miho nodded, tears in his eyes. You are the most important thing in the world. Minjae picked up a shell and looked at it. Were you sad without us? Every day, Miho said. But I didn't let myself feel it. I kept pretending I was okay. I lied to everyone, even myself. Minjun leaned back slightly, looking at him. Did you love Mama when you left? Miho inhaled slowly. Yes, but I didn't know how to show it. I didn't know how to be a good husband. And I hurt her very badly. Did you say sorry? Mingyu asked. Miho nodded. Many times. But sorry doesn't fix everything. Sujin stepped out then. Her presence was soft but commanding. Miho turned, startled, but she didn't speak. She simply walked forward and sat beside them. The boys shifted closer to her instinctively, one on each side. She looked at Miho. They asked. You answered. He gave a small nod, unsure what else to say. Sujin turned to the boys. What do you think? The three of them looked at each other. Minjun said, I think he told the truth. Minjae added, I think he's really sorry. Mingyu shrugged. He brought snacks. They all laughed, including Sujin. The kind of laugh that comes not from joy, but from release. Then Minjae asked quietly, Will he leave again? Sujin met Miho's gaze. You tell them, she said. Miho looked at each of their faces. I'll never leave again, not even if Mama asks me to. I'll stay nearby, always, until you tell me to go. Minjun reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded candy wrapper. Then you can have this. It's my secret lucky paper. Miho took it with reverence, tears slipping down his cheek. Mingyu leaned on his knee. You can stay, but you have to cook breakfast next time. I'll learn, Miho said with a laugh. Just no eggs. I'm terrible at eggs. Sujin watched him. Not the broken man who had returned. Not the selfish boy who had fled. But a father. A real one. Answering the hardest questions a child can ask. And standing still in the storm of their innocence. Later, they walked back home together. The boys ran ahead, chasing butterflies and shouting about whose legs were faster. Sujin and Miho trailed behind. He spoke first. Thank you for letting me answer them. They needed to hear it, she said softly. He hesitated. And you? I needed to hear it too. They walked in silence after that. But something had changed. Not everything was healed. Not everything forgiven. But truth had been spoken in daylight, not buried in the dark. And that, perhaps, was the beginning of something new. Sujin stood by the sink, staring out the window, her hands resting on the edge of the counter. The breeze was warm, the kind that carried memory with it. And tonight, everything inside her felt impossibly still. Miho stood behind her. He didn't speak right away. He just watched her, her profile in the dying light, her fingers gently tapping against the wood, the way her shoulders stayed lifted, as though even now, she was bracing for something. He stepped forward carefully. Sujin. She turned slowly. Her eyes were tired, not from sleep, but from feeling. He swallowed. Can we talk? She gave the faintest nod and walked into the next room. He followed. They sat across from each other. No barriers, no table between them, just space. Honest, stripped, and trembling. I know this isn't the right moment, he said, voice low, but I need to say something before I lose the courage. Her expression didn't change, but something in her eyes flickered. I didn't just leave you because I was afraid, he said. I left you because I didn't believe I was worthy of being loved by someone like you. Miho, no, let me finish, he said gently. I've carried this weight for too long, and the longer I stayed gone, the more it felt like I had to keep pretending it didn't matter. But it did. Every day, every night. The guilt, it drowned me. Sujin stared at him, her chest rising slowly. He looked older suddenly, not just in age but in soul. I know I don't deserve a place in your heart, he continued. But I also know that every time I see you smile now, I remember the girl I used to dream with, the woman who believed in me before I had anything to offer. And I broke her. I broke you. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She didn't look away either. And yet, he said, voice shaking, you built something stronger out of what I shattered. You raised 3 boys into something pure, something good. You became the kind of person I spent my life pretending to be. The silence after his words felt sacred. Sujin finally spoke, her voice calm but heavy. I didn't survive this so you could worship my pain. He flinched. I don't want to be remembered for what I endured, she said. I want to be seen for who I am now, not who I was when you left me. He nodded slowly. Then let me see you. Let me really see you. Not as the woman I broke, but the one who didn't need me to begin with. She looked at him, the storm in her chest finally surfacing. I didn't want to do this alone, Miho. I didn't choose strength. It was the only option left. And every night I cried into my pillow. I hated that somewhere deep inside, I still loved you. A tear slipped down her cheek, and he reached forward, tentative, afraid. But she didn't pull away when his fingers touched hers. And now, he asked softly. I don't know what I feel, she admitted. There's still anger, and pain, and fear. But there's something else too. He leaned closer, whispering, What is it? She looked at him, truly looked. Her heart pounded in her chest like a warning. Or maybe a beginning. Hope, she whispered. He closed his eyes, emotion tightening his face. I'll wait for you, he said. Even if hope is all you can give me right now. Even if it takes years. Sujin nodded slowly, not as a promise, but as a truth. And then, from the hallway, came the soft sound of footsteps. 3 small figures stood there, blinking in the dim light, rubbing their eyes. Iyama, Minjae mumbled. Why are you crying? Sujin smiled through her tears. I'm not crying. I'm remembering. Did Appa say something mean? Minjun asked, already stepping forward with his tiny fists clenched. No, Miho said gently. I just told her something I should have said a long time ago. Mingyu crawled into his lap without hesitation. Then can we tell you something too? Miho looked at him, surprised. Of course. We don't care if you were gone, he said simply. You're here now. The other 2 nodded, and Miho pulled all of them into his arms. His voice cracked as he whispered, I'll never leave again. Never. Sujin stood, watching them, and in her heart, something unlocked. Not forgiveness, not yet, but love. The kind that's been broken, bent, and scarred, yet still chooses to stay. He took it all with humility, never once asking for more than what Sujin gave. And she watched, quietly, carefully, but every day her gaze lingered just a little longer. One evening, as the sky turned the color of burning apricots, Sujin sat on the porch with a small bundle of papers in her lap, her manuscript. The one she had written in fragments over the past few years. Not just letters now, but full chapters. Stories of grief, yes, but also rebirth. She read a few lines out loud as the boys played in the yard, their laughter like music beneath the wind. Miho stepped out with 2 mugs of tea. He placed one beside her, then sat a little ways off, not wanting to interrupt. She glanced over. You don't have to sit like you're in detention. He smiled sheepishly and moved closer. Old habits. She tapped the manuscript. I'm thinking of submitting it. Jaiwoo, the journalist, she offered to help. Not just for a column. A real publisher. You should, he said, sincere. It deserves to be heard. Her fingers tightened around the edges of the paper. But it has all of it. The pain, the rage, the versions of me that were breaking. He looked at her carefully. You don't owe anyone your story, not even me. But if it helps you heal, if it gives you freedom, then write it. All of it. Even the parts that make me the villain. Sujin studied him. You're not afraid of being seen that way anymore? He exhaled slowly. I already was. But now, if the truth hurts me, I'll take it. Because it also lifts you. The silence between them turned heavy, but not dark. She stared into her tea. I'm not the same person I was. I don't even know if I can love the way I used to. Miho's voice was soft. Then love me however you are now. Her breath caught in her throat. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. 3 tiny sea glass stones. 1 green, 1 blue, 1 white. I found them on the beach last week. The boys said they're magic. I didn't understand until now. He opened her palm and placed them gently there. They're rough, not perfect, but still beautiful. Like us. Sujin looked down at the stones, her fingers trembling slightly. You didn't bring a ring? I brought patience, he said, meeting her eyes, because I don't want to rebuild what we had. I want something new, built slowly, carefully, truthfully. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. I'm not ready to say I love you. He smiled softly. That's okay. I'll wait. I'm not ready to start over either. Then we don't start over, he said. We start from here. Tears brimmed in her eyes, but they didn't fall. And then a voice interrupted. Ama! Minjun shouted from the yard. Appa's cheating at tag again. I was not cheating, Miho shouted back. Sujin laughed despite herself. You can't cheat at tag. Tell him that, Miho said, standing up and jogging down the steps. Sujin stood too, watching him chase the boys around the yard, their laughter floating into the fading light. She looked down at the sea glass still resting in her palm. Maybe love didn't have to be loud, or perfect, or certain. Maybe it just had to be true. And maybe, just maybe, she was ready to believe in it again. Not because he had returned. No name, no return address, just a thick white envelope sealed with a crimson wax stamp. He stared at it for a moment, heart thudding, the kind of thud that comes before a fall. He stepped inside slowly. Sujin was at the kitchen counter, cutting fruit for the boys' lunchboxes. She noticed his expression immediately. What is it? She asked. He handed her the envelope. She studied it, then broke the seal. Inside were 2 sheets of paper, legal, formal, cold. Her eyes scanned the first page. The color drained from her face. It's a custody challenge, she whispered. Miho's face went pale. What? She turned the second page toward him. There it was, Hannah Jung's name, printed in sharp, unforgiving ink. She's filed a petition claiming parental interference, Sujin said, her voice low. That you unlawfully took the boys from Seoul without notifying your legal domestic partner. She's arguing that because you never divorced her officially and the boys weren't registered, there's a loophole. Miho stepped back as if hit. No, that can't be right. We weren't married. She was a partner in business. We never... Sujin's voice broke. But in the eyes of the law, you shared assets, public image, appearances, enough to imply a partnership. He looked at her, panic rising. I'll fight this. She's not asking for custody, Sujin said bitterly. She's asking for investigation. She wants to make noise, scandal. She wants to put the boys in front of a court to answer questions. Miho took a sharp breath. No, I won't let her do that. They're just children, Sujin whispered. They don't deserve this. The boys entered the room then, still in pajamas, arguing about dinosaurs. Mingyu had chocolate on his cheek. Miho turned his face away quickly. Sujin crouched down and kissed each of them. Her voice was calm, careful. Go wash up, babies. We'll walk to the beach after lunch. They ran off, completely unaware that their world was on the edge of unraveling. When they were gone, Sujin stood still. Then she reached for the table and slowly lowered herself into the chair. Her fingers pressed against her lips, trying to hold in the trembling. I thought we were past this, she whispered. I thought we were finally safe. Miho knelt in front of her, his hands gripping hers tightly. We are, he said. We'll get a lawyer. I'll handle everything. You won't have to lift a finger. She's trying to scare us. She won't win. But Sujin didn't respond. She stared at him, eyes filled with something deeper than fear. A question. A truth she hadn't dared to say until now. Miho, he leaned closer. What is it? If it comes down to it, she whispered, and the court gives you a choice. If they ask you to take the boys and separate them from me, what will you do? His face twisted in pain. I would never. Don't promise something you can't keep. He sat back, stunned. Sujin stood. Her voice was shaking now. You say you're different, that you've changed, that you're ready to be a father, a partner, a better man. But are you ready to fight for us? Even if it means walking away from everything again. Yes, he said instantly. She turned to him sharply. Even if it means never returning to Seoul? Never working again? Living here quietly, anonymously, without power, without recognition. Are you ready for that, Miho? He opened his mouth, but no words came. The silence was deafening. Sujin's eyes welled. I need to know that you're not here because it's convenient, or because the guilt feels easier here. I need to know that when everything falls apart, when Hannah sues, when the press twists our names again, when the boys ask why, that you won't run. Miho stood slowly. He walked to the counter, stared out the window. The sea beyond the trees was angry.